There's never a dull moment when it comes to Minnesota sports. Whether it's positive or negative.
The Yankees have swept the Twins.
Minnesota Sports Chat has you covered. Talking nothing but Minnesota sports all year long. It's time now for the soon-to-be award-winning, if only in his own mind, Minnesota Sports Chat with your host, Ross Brendel.
Well, welcome inside edition number 163 of the soon-to-be award-winning Minnesota Sports Chat. Yes, award-winning, if only in my own mind. The man behind that open, Mr. Manny Hill, at Manny Hill 84 on the Twitter machine, joins Minnesota Sports Chat in mere moments. We're going to have a lot of fun today, talking Wild and Wolves with them both in the middle of their opening round playoff series, but we're going to talk about them from more of a historical point of view. More on that in just moments. A big thank you to you for continuing to help me grow Minnesota Sports Chat. I truly do mean that. Thank you so much. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Thank you for telling your family and friends. And please make sure you rate and review on Apple if you have yet to do so. And if you're listening via that Score North Taxi Squad feed, I encourage you to subscribe to Minnesota Sports Chat wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Without further ado, Mr. Manny Hill. Manny, happy NBA and NHL playoff season to you and to all of those who celebrate this glorious time of year. How you doing, my guy?
Pretty good. I'm just trying to, as you can probably look at me, those that are maybe viewing this on YouTube, you can see me trying to adjust my camera. I'm a little out of focus right now. So I suddenly just went blurry for some reason.
You know what, Manny? I've been out of focus much of my life. So if it's a 30-minute blurry camera issue, it is what it is. I think you look pretty good. I see what you're saying, but it's not that bad. You're good. I wouldn't worry about it.
I thought about when the Open was playing, I thought about, for the viewers, I thought about just mouthing everything that I was saying in the Open as it was happening too. I thought about doing that too, but maybe next time.
And yes, a few weeks back, I did start dumping these on YouTube, just trying to build up a bit of an organic following before I really go all out on promoting this on the YouTube machine. But yes, Minnesota Sports Chat is available on YouTube. Just type in my name, Ross Brendel, or Minnesota Sports Chat, and you will find it. You will also, if you follow me on the soon-to-be defunct Twitter machine at the Ross Brendel, you can typically find the links there as well. Okay, Manny, I do this to you every now and then where I kind of vaguely tell you what we're talking about, but I don't really tell you what we're talking about because that's fun for me, and I hope fun for the people listening. Here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to spit some random facts. We'll talk about them. And then I'm basically going to play a what does Manny remember about the Minnesota Wild and the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I hope that will be fun for people listening because when I ask you these questions, they can play along in their car, at their computers, at their TVs, however they are consuming the pod. Does that sound fair to you?
That sounds very fair. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, so here's where we are going to start. The Minnesota Wild, Manny, and Minnesota Timberwolves, both in their opening round playoff series. When you do a weekly podcast, it's really tough to be reactionary when you're doing these playoff series of 4 to 7 games. So I said historically, or not historically, I said to myself, what would be the best way to do a podcast? I said, let's look back at the futility that is the Minnesota Timberwolves and Minnesota Wild in the playoffs, but do it in kind of a fun way. So we'll start with this. The Minnesota Wild and Minnesota Timberwolves, Manny, have made the playoffs X amount of times in the same season since the Minnesota Wild became a franchise in 2000. Do you know how many times the Minnesota Timberwolves have made the playoffs in the same year that the Minnesota Wild have made the playoffs? Any random guess?
I'm going to say 3 times.
Ooh, very close. I don't know if, do I have a buzzer for you? I don't. Oh, no, wait a second. I do. You want another stab at that?
Is it 4?
Four
Okay,
times. And here we go. 3 of them are recent, by the way. 2002 and 2003, when the Wild made their run to the Western Conference Finals. The Wolves made a run to the Western Conference Finals the following year, but the Wolves, or the but the Wild did not make the playoffs.
Right.
Then again in 2017 and 2018, the first round exit for the Timberwolves. I believe that year the Wild may have... No, the Wild didn't advance that year either. They haven't advanced since, 2015, 2016?
Yeah, and then last year and this year, right?
And this year, 4 times. Okay. So, I guess, here's my one question to you, Manny, and I want to...
You know what it is? I forgot about the Tibbs year. I forgot about the Jimmy Butler year.
The spirit of this pod, Manny, I want to have fun with this, okay? So I say this in a fun way, and I say this in jest. How is it possible in a league where half the teams make the playoffs, both leagues, now more if you count the play-in in the NBA, in 23 years, I guess technically 22 seasons because the NHL missed an entire year, 4 times? How is that bleeping possible?
Well, you thank the Wolves for that. I mean, that's the Wolves' fault, really, for being so inept for so long.
But still, 4 times.
I mean, the Wild at least have been making the playoffs semi-regularly, especially in the Parise Suter era. I mean, it was basically almost every year, right?
Yeah, for the most part. And then back-to-back years, they made it to the second round and ran into those dreaded Chicago Blackhawks. So, okay, Manny, Minnesota Wild, Minnesota Timberwolves. Since 2000, they have both made the playoffs in the same season 4 times. There is a fun fact that hopefully will change. Maybe it will change tonight. And I say tonight, Friday, April 21st is when we're recording this. I saw this on Twitter from a couple different people, and I can't remember who they were, so sorry that I'm not sourcing it better. The Minnesota Wild and Minnesota Timberwolves have won a playoff game on the same day 1 time.
When was that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm going to guess, could that have been, maybe that was 2017, 2018? I honestly have no clue.
Well, the Jimmy Butler year, they won just the 1 playoff game.
Correct.
Against Houston. That was game 3 at home.
So I won't be able to give the correct answer for people there, but just 1 time as of April 21st, 2023, have the Wild and Wolves won a playoff game in the same day.
I'm gonna guess probably 03.
Yeah, maybe it was. What was the Wolves' first round matchup that year?
That was the first time they played. That was the first year that the NBA went to a best of 7 in the first round after being best of 5 for so long. And the Wolves, that was the first time the Wolves had home court advantage in the playoff series, and they lost in 6 games to the Lakers.
Okay, so
it was a 4-5 matchup.
Yeah, and the Wild played 2 7-game series to start their playoff run that year. So logic, that might not be right, but logic would tell us that perhaps it is. Only 4 times, Manny, in NBA history, correct me if I'm wrong, but only 4 times in NBA history has a number 8 seed beat a number 1 seed. Mm-hmm. In the NHL, it has happened 13 times since 1994. Okay, so here's my question to you.
Oh, what a sport.
What does that say about either league? So, and I don't think that it says anything necessarily good or bad, but just in general, what does that say to you about the 2 playoffs? Now, the NHL in the last few years has changed how they do it. They do the 4 pods of 4 now, but they're still technically, I guess, 2, 7, and 8 seeds. That would be the wild cards. But yeah, I mean, think about that. 13 times it's happened in the NHL. In the NBA, it's only happened 4 times. So to you, what does that say about the 2 leagues?
Well, I think what it says is maybe not necessarily anything about the 2 leagues, but about the 2 sports. I think you and I, we both. I think you're more of a hockey person than I am, but I follow the NHL and the sport, pretty substantially. And
I would say we're perfect complements on this.
Yeah.
The way I watch the NHL. No,
the way you watch the NHL is the way I watch the NBA.
Yep, and then flip it. So yep, correct. Thank you.
But I think we'll both agree that in the sport of hockey, there's a lot more room for random things to happen. I don't want to say fluky things because I think that kind of disrespects the team that is on the positive end of that fluky thing that happens. Um, but I think, you know, you watch a sport like hockey, you know, you dump a puck into the deep into the zone, it bounces off the wall, and then all of a sudden it's in front of the goaltender, and somebody's right there to knock it in.
Are you referencing the Minnesota Wild to the Blackhawks loss when the puck went off the stanchion, came back, and then was put in the net?
Yes.
Oh, you're just digging at me.
Or
by the way,
or
I'm
when
still
when a former defenseman of the Minnesota Wild named Kim Janssen backs into the goaltender, backs into Nicholas Backstrom in the first round playoff series. Was that against the Ducks in the first round?
I think it might have been.
07?
I finally moved past that because now my new disappointment is the Gopher hockey team completely no-showing the national championship game. That's my new new hockey disappointment.
And for reference, listeners, Ross and I have known each other for almost 18 years, and for I would say the better part of about a decade, Kim Janssen was like public enemy number one on Ross's list.
Yeah.
For backing in to Nicholas Backstrom in that playoff series.
What an awful way to lose a game. It's almost as bad as, remember when the Sharks scored on their own net?
Yeah.
It's almost as bad as that. The Sharks at least turned that around and made a nice run. So on that, and this is what I would say about the Minnesota Timberwolves, and again, I'm not going to talk about games, but I wanted the Minnesota Timberwolves to legitimately make the playoffs, not just the play-in tournament. But at the end of the day, I'm glad they won some form. Technically, I don't even know how to say this. When you lose the opening round of the play-in, but then you win, did you technically win the play-in tournament even though you're the second team that got in? Like, that's the part that confuses me about the play-in tournament.
Yeah, well, and the other thing of it is none of it goes on, like, the record either. Like,
correct.
None of it doesn't go into anybody's final record. They're technically not viewed as playoff wins. I guess you could call them like postseason wins, but they're not like that win against Oklahoma City is not going to go on Chris Finch's playoff record, quote unquote.
Yeah. So
none of the stats are accounted for either.
So on this with the Timberwolves, I never gave them a realistic shot at all to beat the Nuggets. I still don't think they have a realistic shot. Maybe they'll win a game. Heck, maybe they'll get lucky and win 2 games. I'm not convinced they'll even win a game. I do hope that they do that. But when you see the Minnesota Timberwolves are the 8 seed taking on the number 1 seed, I think you go, oh, don't get swept. In the past, when the Minnesota Wild has been a number 8 seed and took on the Chicago Blackhawks years ago in the first round, I don't think anybody realistically thought the Minnesota Wild would win, but in the back of your head, you went, well, it is possible. That never happens in the NBA. That's why when a number 8 seed wins, you are legitimately surprised. And like I said, I don't know, Manny, what that says about either one of the leagues. But to me, if I was them, I know why it's a 7-game series. Most of these series, I mean, can they just still be 5 games in the first round?
Yeah, I kind of wish they would go back to 5 games. And I think if you have them go back to 5 games, I think you're opening up more opportunities for more first-round upsets, honestly.
Which they probably don't want. That's why they went to 7, right? They want the best teams. And let's be honest, Manny, not only do they want the best teams, if possible, they want the best markets sticking around. So they don't want a team to get ousted if they don't have to.
And they want the biggest stars in the sport to advance in the postseason too. And in this particular case, if you got the Wolves and the Nuggets, Nikola Jokic is an MVP candidate. He's won the award twice already. And the Nuggets are one of the best teams in the league. So it kind of works better in the NBA's favor. And for whatever reason, for many reasons, it seems like the national media kind of hates the Timberwolves. In some way, shape, or form. I don't entirely blame them, but it does kind of feel like there is a little bit of a vendetta against the Wolves for whatever reason.
Couple of fun facts for you, then we'll we won't literally, but then we will actually take a deeper dive going down memory lane. Manny, can you name the only number 8 seed in either league to win a championship? I think we know it's not the NBA.
Not the NBA, no. The Knicks in '99 were the only team that made the finals as an 8 seed.
You'll know it. If you don't get it, you'll know it when I say it.
Was it the first time the Kings won?
God, you're so good at this.
Was that when they beat They beat the Devils, right?
The 2012 LA Kings
Yeah.
had to win in their final regular season game to qualify for the playoffs. They got in. They were the 8th seed. They then went on to beat the top 3 seeds in the Western Conference Finals to get to the playoffs.
Now, wasn't the bit with that, though, that they made a bunch of trades, or like they made like a couple significant trades at the deadline that when you looked at the final roster going into the playoffs, it's like, yeah, they were an 8 seed, but because of such, they got off to such a bad start and they made a bunch of trades and the roster was probably more like a top 4 seed.
Well, and if I recall, Manny, I believe they were also fairly injured that year and getting healthy at the right time.
Yeah.
Still an incredible feat, though, to beat the top 3 seeds. And I believe were the Devils the 1 or 2 seed that year.
Yeah, they might have been. Yeah, they were I think they were like a 2 seed in the East.
In your final stat, and this will stay the same for at least 7 to 10 days, I'll never get over the stat because it's going to take years to reverse this, if ever. Manny, the Minnesota Wild are now 8-24 all-time in games 1 and 2 of playoff series. How is that possible? Even if you
Is that the question? How is that possible?
Even if you're the lower seed in hockey, for everything we just said, to be 8-24 is pretty darn incredible. I don't know what's more incredible, Manny. The 8-24 all time in games 1 and 2, or the fact that somehow with those records they've still won 4 playoff series all time. That's even more incredible, I think, if you think about it, because it takes 4 wins to win a playoff series.
You know me, I don't.
They barely have that in games 1 and 2, and they've played 32 of them.
You know me. You've known me for a long time, and I don't typically like to sort of feed into the fatalist Minnesota sports team, narrative.
Yeah, we can change our destiny.
But when you think about that, considering what we just talked about with the sport of hockey and the NHL in general, the fact that that the Wild have that bad a record in the first 2 games of a playoff series is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, you really, honestly, it's tough to comprehend, but then our favorite baseball team has also lost 19 playoff games in a row. That's a record in which, when you think about Major League Baseball, the honest-to-God worst baseball team in a 162-game season will show up and win a third of their games.
Mm-hmm.
Teams don't ever lose 19 games in the regular season. I mean, they do. It's very few and far between. But
they haven't all been against the Yankees either. That's the other part of it.
No, the Astros are in there. The A's are in there. Yeah. Do you know what's in my my cup, Manny? Large cup.
I'm gonna guess coffee.
Yeah, Beans Coffee Company. Yeah, you might not always know it, but it is officially spring, which means that Beans Coffee Company, the pop-up shop, they're taking reservations, offers hot and cold espresso drinks, drip coffee, and so much more. It's a great treat for your office employees, special events, fundraisers. To book that pop-up shop for the 2023 season, super simple. Just visit coffeebybeans.com. That is coffeebybeans.com, and don't wait. These spaces are filling up. Bring them in. It is worth it. Heck, I love the work aspect. Bring it in. Lunchtime, have your employees go out, get a nice cup of coffee. Heck, even right now on these cool spring days. For online orders, when you're shopping by the bag or for a coffee subscription, don't forget promo code SportsChat will save you cash at checkout. We all love that. Beans Coffee Company, they ship anywhere in the U.S. with free shipping on all orders of $35 or more. I love that Perfectus blend. You all know that by now. The Mikado, so many great blends. Check them all out. Sample them for yourself. Coffeebybeans.com. Promo code SportsChat to save at checkout.
Is broken up by Sekarash. Here's Keane on it. And it's taken away. Sergei Zoltak for Minnesota. Here's Brunette. Brunette's in. Andrew Brunette shot a score. Andrew Brunette in sudden death overtime. And Minnesota is moving on. Ladies and gentlemen, the Minnesota Wild have pulled off the upset.
Yeah, roughly 20 years ago, the Minnesota Wild, Andrew Brunette, Marion Gaborik and company shocked the world and knock off the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the playoffs.
Steve
Manny,
Levy on the call there for
Steve,
ESPN.
yeah, Steve Levy on the call. Thanks to ESPN for the highlight.
Do we know what has happened to Goldie's call on that on the local feed back then?
You know,
I can't find that anywhere on YouTube.
Is Goldie no longer allowed in this town since that Minnesota Vikings Detroit Lions fiasco from a few years ago?
I forgot about that. Well, that was an experience.
There is. If you type into YouTube, if you type in Mike Goldberg, like Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings, somebody went through and did like a 25-minute video of how bad of a call that was.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've seen it.
I don't want to dump on Goldberg, but it is so funny. You have to watch it. People seen it.
It's hilarious.
Just Google it. So here's what we're going to play, Manny. We're going to play What Do You Remember About Your 2002-2003 Minnesota Wild, who went on to the Western Conference Finals. That's how we're going to spend the remainder of our time. We're also going to do the same thing with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I promise you it's not as difficult as this might sound. I just have 3 or 4 bullet points for each. We will start with the Minnesota Wild. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
And please play along wherever you are watching or consuming this podcast. Marian Gaborik led the 2002-2003 Minnesota Wild with, this is incredible to me, 65 regular season points. Can you tell me who was second? And hint, there's actually 2 answers here. What 2 players were second in total points for the Minnesota Wild in 2002 and 2003? If you get one of them, I'll give you the buzzer, the good buzzer, the ding ding.
Was Bruno one of them?
Bruno was not one of them, so you get this.
Okay, I'm trying to think here. Who else could it have been? Just trying to think of
Bruno would have technically been 4th because the 2 who finished second would have been ahead of Bruno.
So Gabby had 65 points, you said?
Yep. Here you go. Gabby had 65 at 1. Bruno was 4th with 46. 2 players at 48. Who could they be?
Oh, gosh, I'm going to need a minute here.
One of the names is hilarious. He's one of my all-time favorite unsung heroes of the Minnesota Wild.
Well,
there are people all over the country screaming right now, Manny, it's this person. Manny, I know it's this person.
I'm just trying to think of who else was on that team. It wasn't Richard Park.
No, he did have a big game winner, though. Game 6 against Chicago.
Against Colorado. Went 5-hole on Patrick Waugh. I remember that. Oh gosh, why am I? It's not Sergei Zoltak. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Nope, he was in that highlight.
Oh wow, I'm gonna kick myself. I'm gonna kick myself for not knowing this.
I'm giving you 5 more seconds. 5. 4.
Don't tell me it
3.
was Cliff Ronning. It was not Cliff Ronning, was it? It was Cliff Ronning. Old man Cliff Ronning.
Old man Cliff Ronning had 48 points. Another gentleman at 48 points. Do you want to take one more quick stab at it?
I couldn't even tell you who else was. It wasn't like Antti Laxton.
Come on, Manny. I have faith in you. Antti Laxton, one of my favorite names of all time.
Was it West?
It was not our guy Wes. It was Pascal Dupuis.
Pascal was. Why am I? See, okay. I forgot Pascal Dupuis was on that team. I always remember him coming up with the team like a few years later.
He was a good player for quite some time for them.
Yeah.
I believe an all-star. Did he make an all-star team? I think he did.
Was it him or Philippe Kuba?
Oh, it may have been Philippe Kuba.
Yeah.
Former neighbor of my brother. Hi, Sam. Which goalie played in more games in 2002-2003? Was it Manny Fernandez or Dwayne Rollison? This is the regular season.
Regular season.
Who played in more games in the regular season? Dwayne Rollison or Manny Fernandez?
I want to say it's Manny. Was it Manny? Oh, okay.
You went with Manny just because you share a name with him, didn't you? It was Dwayne Rollison actually appeared in 50 games, Manny Fernandez 35. I imagine the reason why these numbers are off is at times they probably replaced each other when somebody was having a bad night.
Yeah. And Manny was the primary goalie in the Colorado series, right? And then Rolly was in the Vancouver series, and then Jacques went back to Manny for the Conference Finals against the Ducks.
Well, it leads me to my next question. Which goalie played more games in the playoffs that year?
It was probably Manny, right? It was Rolly? Really?
Rolly played in 11. Manny played in 9.
Okay.
Here's your final one on the Minnesota Wild. And it's not actually the 2002-2003 team, but it does have something to do with 2002. It is the NHL entry draft, Manny Hill. In the 2002 NHL entry draft, who did the Minnesota Wild take 8th overall? And yes, you will remember this guy. He did turn out to be a pretty good player.
Was it PMB?
There you go. Pierre-Marc Bouchard.
My guy.
8th overall. Your Minnesota Wild would lose in the Western Conference Finals 4-0 to the Anaheim Ducks. Still an incredible run, and honestly, the most fun I've had watching hockey until probably, and they actually kind of ended similarly, until probably the Gopher hockey squad this year. Just fun hockey.
I almost said Benoit Pouliot at first.
Yeah, let's not go down that road.
One, but then when you said he actually turned out to be a good player, then I was like, nah, it's not him.
Benoit finally turned out to be a decent player, but it was about 10 years later for different teams. So
I thought he when he went to Montreal, I think he did okay.
Well, let's talk some Timberwolves and get out of here.
Weber for the tie, and the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, Chris Webber missed late. The Minnesota Timberwolves knock off the Kings in 7 games, and they end up eventually losing to the Lakers in 6 games because Sam Cassell injured himself with the big cojones dance. That's not even from me. That's not allegedly. Flip Saunders basically said as much. Don't know if that's ever been proven, but if it came from Flip, it was probably true. So the Minnesota Timberwolves in 2003-2004, thanks to TNT for the highlight, by the way, the Minnesota Timberwolves go to the Western Conference Finals the following year, and I think young Ross started thinking, boy, this is great. Our teams compete for championships. Little did I know.
Yeah.
Little did I know.
The Twins were in the midst of winning 3 straight AL Central titles, too, back then.
Yeah, and what did that get them?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the run to the
ALCS in 02, yeah.
Even though they ended up losing in 5 games, a run to the ALCS is nothing to sneeze at. Okay, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they won the Midwest Division in 2003-2004. Do you remember how many wins they had, Manny?
They went 58-24.
That's incredible that you can remember that. You get a double buzzer for that.
And I believe the San Antonio Spurs finished 1 game behind them in the standings, too.
Oh, you're good. How many Western Conference playoff teams from 2003-2004 can you name?
Okay. The Wolves.
That is 1.
The Wolves played the Nuggets in the first round in the 1-8 matchup.
2.
San Antonio.
I'm just going to give you all these buzzers. Yep, that is 3.
The Lakers.
That is 4. I keep saying buzzer. I use buzzer and... Does buzzer work for good and bad? Are these both buzzers? That's a bell, right?
Yeah, it's a bell.
That's a bell. That's a buzzer. Okay.
Sacramento Kings.
Oh, that's 5. You're on fire here. This is incredible.
That's just Western Conference teams. I'm going to say... No, the Sonics did not make the playoffs that year. They made it the next year. The Dallas Mavericks.
That is 6. All right. You got 2 more to go. You're missing the 6 and 7 seeds.
Portland Trailblazers.
For the record, Manny, I think I would have done okay on this too. I would not have gotten.
Did not make the playoffs that year. Okay.
They did not. No. Again, somebody's driving down the road right now going, Manny! Or they're saying, and by they're saying the name.
I want to say, was it Houston? Yeah, that was with Yao and I think Tracy McGrady.
Yo.
All
right, you're missing 1. Do you want a hint?
No. It's just Western Conference teams.
I can't even think of who would have been on this team.
It couldn't have been Utah because John Stockton had retired the year before and Karl Malone had left to go to the Lakers.
You are correct in that assessment. Oh, the look you just gave me, I could turn into a meme. For those watching on YouTube, Manny just gave me the slowest head turn.
Oh God, it couldn't. Wasn't Phoenix? It was not Phoenix. Was it Phoenix?
Nope, you are correct. It was not Phoenix.
Okay. Who else is in the West? All 3 Texas teams made it. I've listed them already.
I think it's even funnier that you just said who else is in the West because it sums up my general belief on this franchise. Although they've been a lot better as of late. I'm just going to tell you, and you're gonna hate it.
Who is it?
Phil Jackson was once rumored to potentially be headed to coach this team. Does that help you?
No.
the Memphis Grizzle.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Who,
with Hubie Brown. Yeah.
Was that like Randolph? Who was on those teams? I can't.
No, Zebo was still in Portland, I think. But they had the Grizzlies had Pau Gasol, a very young Pau Gasol.
Okay.
Hubie Brown was the coach. I think Hubie Brown won Coach of the Year that year. Yeah, that sounds about right.
I got 3 more quick ones for you, then we'll get out of here in this historical review of Minnesota Timberwolves and Minnesota Wild playoff futility. By the way, I don't even want to calculate how bad the Timberwolves have been in games 1 and 2. I told somebody on Twitter I don't have enough time, nor is my math that proficient to go through and add up all of those, because I can't imagine theirs is much better than 8-24, especially when you go back to the 7 first-round exits in a row. But actually, they did well in some of those series. Aside from winning them,
I think but I think they've only gone up two games to none one time.
Well, the Portland playoff series is still one of the biggest statistical anomalies of all time. They led all of that playoff series except for like 5.5 minutes and still lost in 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
It's nuts. The Timberwolves beat every opponent at least one time in 2003, 2004, including 2 or more times against every Western Conference opponent, Manny, except for this team, who they only beat once. Can you name the team they only beat one time?
In the Western Conference.
In the Western Conference that year, they struggled with one team. Who did they struggle with? And in my best, Keith Morrison. And why? Because
Was it Memphis?
No, it was not Memphis. It doesn't make sense that they would struggle to this team, by the way.
Well, because the reason why I bring up Memphis is because I remember when Pau Gasol was really young, he was like the one guy that used to give KG trouble. Like he was the one guy that could match up with KG really well during that time. I mean, Tim Duncan obviously was that too, but
Timmy, as KG used to call him.
Timmy. Oh, wow. Was it Houston?
No, not Houston. The Timberwolves went 1-3 that year against the mighty Portland Jailblazers, who didn't even make the playoffs.
Right, they were not very good.
That's never been an easy place for the Timberwolves to play. The Rose Garden.
Portland's a nightmare. I think it's called the Moda Center now or something like that. But yeah, Portland's always been like a hellhole for the Wolves to go to.
Only 2 Minnesota Timberwolves played in and started all 82 games in 2003 and 2004. Who were those 2 Timberwolves, Manny?
Was it KG and Spree?
Wow. Sam Cassell must have, my hunch is he sat out maybe the last game of the year. He played in 81.
Okay.
Trenton Hassel started 81 games, started 74 and played in 81.
I wonder if Wally missed like half the season with an injury.
I wonder if Sammy C and Trenton sat out game 82. Or did the Wolves need to win 82 to win the division? I don't remember that.
I think they did because the Spurs were like finished 1 game behind them in that the old Midwest division.
Yeah. Okay. Your final question on how well do you remember your 2003-2004 Minnesota Timberwolves? The 3 leading scorers predictably were KG, Latrell, and Sammy C. Care to guess the fourth and fifth leading scorers of the 2003 and 2004 Minnesota Timberwolves?
I'm going to guess Wally was number 4 at like 10 points a game.
Wow, that's really good. He had 10.2 points per game. Who was fifth?
Oh, wow. Fifth.
There's a lot of candidates here, Manny, for fifth.
Yeah.
They're all jumbled up too.
It could have been Trenton Hassel. It could have been Freddie Hoiberg. It could have been.
Don't forget
it could have been Michael.
Don't forget about the Candy Man.
Was it Michael Candy?
Sorry about all these beeps here. If you're hearing those, my apologies. I'll try and take care of that. It is not the Candy Man. Do you want one more stab at it?
Yeah, let me take one more stab at it. I want to say, was it Freddie Hoiberg?
It was not Freddie Hoiberg. Some would say, let me get to it, Manny.
I know who it is.
Some would say this individual was constantly carrying around the stress of both worlds.
Yeah, I know who it is. It was Troy Hudson.
That's Troy Hudson.
Yeah, that's right. I briefly forgot about Troy because he had to get, I think he had like ankle surgery and ended up not being available for the playoffs. Considering what happened to Sam, it would have been nice to have Troy healthy in that Lakers series.
In closing, Manny, as we wrap up this edition of Minnesota Sports Chat, I hope this was fun for the listeners, going down memory lane with the 02-03 Wild and 03-04 Minnesota Timberwolves. Looking back, you could choose that Wolves team if you want. Maybe it's the 1998-99 Minnesota Vikings. What's the biggest missed opportunity for you? What team should have hoisted a trophy that didn't? That Wolves team is pretty close. Like that, they were close. Yeah. They were very close.
I would say, oh, wow, that's a good question. Are we talking just like
it can be anybody. I would tell you, and this is still recency bias, it's going to take me a while to get over it, which typically I get over losses pretty quickly. That Gopher Hockey National Championship game against Quinnipiac is going to bug me for quite some time. I mean, the Gophers should have won that game 5-1.
Yeah, I would say, well, here's one that's interesting. I don't know if it would be number one on my list, but when Minnesota United made it to the conference finals, and they were minutes away from going to the MLS Cup championship.
I thought about this recently.
I think Seattle scored like 3 goals in like 6 minutes or something to win the game.
Yeah, and it didn't even get to overtime. They won it in extra time, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah, that was the official welcome to Minnesota sports. MNUFC Minnesota United. Well, Manny, I hope this was fun for you. I know I put you on the spot a bit, but you always do so well at these things. So
that was fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. By the way, for those watching on YouTube, Manny is sporting. I told him, I said, "Wow, great shirt." He goes, "Oh, it's a Sandy Koufax jersey." I said, "Oh, well, then you can go to hell because Sandy Koufax cost the Minnesota Twins, which should be their third World Series."
Well, maybe that's
Don
the
Drysdale
opportunity right there in '65.
Well, doesn't 3 sound so much more than 2? It's only 1, but 3 sounds. If you say you're 3-time World Series champion, it does hold
a little bit more weight. Yeah.
It just sounds so much more impressive than 2. However, maybe this is the year. Maybe the Twins will get that third World Series championship. Who knows?
They finally have some decent pitching. That's nice.
Yeah, and now the pitching is covering up for lack of hitting, which is nice.
Yes.
And hopefully the hitting will come around at some point. At Manny Hill 84 on Twitter. Check him out as well, jazz88.fm with that MPS Voices that is right around the corner. Thank you, Manny.
You got it, my friend, anytime.
And thank you to you for taking Minnesota Sports Chat with you wherever you go and for telling your family and friends. I'm Ross Brendel saying thank you so much for listening to this walk down memory lane.